Lesson 7, learning to focus. Learning to focus with a camera is different than focusing with a phone. Learning to get your main subject in focus when you're taking photos with your camera is really important, because if your main subject's out of focus, your photo won't be so interesting. And focus is one aspect of digital photography that you cannot fix. If your subject's out of focus, that's the way it's staying. There is no way to truly effectively fix an out of focus photograph. Make sure it's sharp. This is what my picture editor used to tell me when I was a cadet photographer at the newspaper. If I was sent on an assignment and I came back with a photo that was out of focus, there was no way it was going to be published. When you're using your phone to take photos, it will automatically set the focus point, or you can do it by touching the screen. When you're using your camera to take photos, it's more important to really concentrate on what you're focusing on and choose where in your composition that you want to focus. This is quite different than using your phone to take photos, because depending on a few different things, mainly your lens settings, it will mean that not all of a photograph is in sharp focus. Some of it may be sharp, other parts of it might be very out of focus. When you're taking photos with your camera, one of the first things that you've got to think about is which part of your composition that you want to be in sharp focus. What's the most important part of your image? Where do you want people to look at when they see your photograph? When you use the viewfinder on your camera, the camera will usually automatically choose where to focus. This is the default setting on many cameras. Or you can also set the focus point yourself. I'll go into this more in the next lesson. But for now, I want you to be aware that focusing with your camera is much more critical than focusing with your phone. Lightly touching the shutter release button activates the autofocus. You can also manually focus a camera lens like this. Using some cameras with touchscreen technology, you can also activate the focus point by touching the monitor of your camera. Lesson 7, practical exercise, learning to focus. This exercise will help you to learn to focus on the main subject of your composition. For this exercise, start with your camera on aperture priority and set your aperture to the widest aperture setting. That's the lowest f-stop number. So on my lens, it's going to be f4. Find some interesting subjects to photograph. Choose a variety of subjects for this exercise and make sure that some of them are a fair distance from the background, and if you can, choose some subjects that are both static and moving. I'm going to start by photographing these pomelos here. Think about how you're holding your camera. Is it stable? Are you keeping it steady? Check that your shutter speed's not too slow. If it is slow and you're hand holding your camera, this can risk camera shake and cause blur to the whole image, making it very difficult to see what part of your photo is in focus. For each subject you're photographing, first use the viewfinder to make your compositions, and then do some also using the live view, looking at your monitor. And if your monitor is a touchscreen variety, use this for some of them to activate the focus. So set the focus point by touching your monitor. Start with your widest zoom setting and take a few photos, and then zoom in closer. When you zoom in closer, you may need to back up a little bit if your camera won't focus. If you're too close with the full zoom, the camera may not focus on your subject. And take a few more photos. Make some interesting compositions. For some of the photos, get in as close as you can, focus in as tight as you can on your subject, even if it is more than filling the frame. So even if you can't get your whole subject in the frame, come in as close as you can to it and take some photos. And in other compositions, back up and zoom out so your subject is very small in your composition. As you're taking your photos, watch what's happening on your monitor or through your viewfinder. Can you see the point that the camera is focusing on? There should be some sort of visual indication. This varies from camera to camera, but it'll show you what point or points the camera is focusing on. And also take some photos with your phone so you've got them to compare with the photos you're making with your camera. Is your camera always focusing where you want it to? Often it will, but sometimes it might not, because your camera doesn't actually know what your subject is. I'll teach more about this in the next lesson. Did you find it easier to use the viewfinder or to use the touchscreen in live view mode? As you're taking the photos, do make some notes about how far away from your subject you are and what focal length lens you are using. And don't forget to save 2 or 3 of your best photos to your favorites folder. Study your results. Did you manage to get your main subject in sharp focus in most of your pictures? Focus takes practice to be able to really master it, and the more you practice, the better you'll get. The faster you'll become and the more accurate you'll get at focusing on your main subject. The main points from this lesson are: bad focus generally cannot be fixed once you've taken a picture. The whole composition does not need to be in focus. Learn to focus on your main subject. Practice this to improve your photography. Choose what the main subject of your composition is and focus on it.